the war on terror is a war against anyone, anywhere in the world that doesn't want to go along with one world government and no borders. We just want the masses, the teeming masses out there, to be consuming.
Yeah, well, yeah, we're no longer citizens of our country. We are consumers. We're all consumers, and there's no question the national corporations and all the grand nationals are all really just looking for more consumers, and that's why they really encourage unlimited population growth and unlimited and to take away the borders of every country. What I think is going to happen, and it can't help but happen as the gas prices go up and as oil. You see, if you read some of the great oil figures right now, we still have about half the oil on the planet still under the ground, but it's harder to get to. It's more, you have to take, instead, we used to take 1 unit of energy to pull 100 units of energy, gasoline, out of the soil. Today, we're putting in more energy to get less energy units out. So we're putting in, 3 energy units to get 1 energy unit out. At some point, it's going to be 10 energy units to 1 energy, and then it's going to be 50, and then, of course, it'll be so expensive. Again, as I said, gasoline will be $20 a gallon, if you can even get it. So it's going to radically change, and so one world government is not going to happen, because at some point, everybody's going to curl back into their own civilization and try to just feed themselves. I mean, these populations that we have, 312 million here in the United States, are fed by tractors that run on gasoline. And at some point, as the gasoline and the energy, as I discuss in my book, becomes so expensive or non-existent, then how do you feed these populations? Well, as I just said, 18 million humans starve to death every year right now. Can you imagine when those numbers go up to 20 and 30 and 40 and 50 million starve to death every year? And that's what's coming as we continue to simply run out of energy to drive the tractors that to fill the bins with food, and especially as population grows up. I'll give you an example. Ecological footprint is the amount of acreage that every person uses in a particular country. In Ethiopia, it's 0.4 acres. Okay, a person can live on 0.4 acres and grow enough food and stay alive and use water and so forth. But here in the United States is 19.4 acres. 19.4 acres. For every person added to America, the ecological footprint, they must use up 19.4 acres. That's roads, it's tract housing, that's schools, that's firehouses, that's malls, and so forth. So when you add 100 million people to this country, and at 19.4 acres each, the ecological footprint, that's 1.94 billion, B as in boy, billion acres of land. And that land is farmland, that's arable land, that's wilderness. We're destroying that much land within the next 24 years to simply house this next 100 million people. Ladies and gentlemen, how many of you think that the animals have any chance to survive? How much do you think it's going to cost to continue to have arable land? I mean, we're losing 100,000 acres of arable land here in Colorado every year now because we're growing at such a horrific rate of speed. And so you can see that we're running out of land, and then you start talking about the water sources. You can see that this horrific population overloading is going to have really horrifically horrible results in the long term.
They found that the snow on the top of Mount Rainier, Mount Shasta, was poisonous because of aluminum. That's aluminum's coming down in our water supplies, and they're already putting fluoride in the water, which will eat through concrete, Frosty. So it seems like they're really doing their best to lower the population, but is this the case? Do they know this population explosions have happened? So they start. And by the way, the system that you were talking about, the countries taking back their and becoming self-sufficient is exactly what Muammar Gaddafi was doing in Libya. They were piping the water out of the cisterns. They were greening the deserts, and then suddenly he became a dictator You know, maybe we just noticed it after 40 years. But it seems to me that this whole bombing of Iraq and Libya and Afghanistan is all because these people weren't going along with the central bank, weren't going along with the plan, weren't you know, were taking care of their own people.
Well, you know, one of the things that I learned, and I was an officer in the United States Army from 68 to 71, is that the United States has been one of the most provocative nations as far as waging wars on the planet for the last 40 years. I mean, on a bet of the dominoes theory, we waged war on Korea. We then waged war on Vietnam with the Gulf of Tonkin resolution, which was nothing more than an excuse. And you could use the same excuse with the weapons of mass destruction, was also completely fraudulent. And, you know, if you had any kind of a sane leader, all we really had to do was maintain our borders and maintain tracking of our visa holders coming into this country. And we could have also just stayed out of Muslim countries, as they asked us to way back there in the early 90s.
Yeah, they could stone each other to death. You know, I mean, you know, I don't care. I don't mind if somebody wants to get down on their knees and stick their nose in the ground and stick their ass up in the air and pray to Mecca. No problem. Just don't expect me to get down there with you. You know, our Constitution takes care of the religions. You can have a different religion without coming over here and trying to install Sharia law here. So, of course, this is the Muslims numbering several billion around the country can be a threat to us if we let them in.
Right. Well, you know, and we only by in 1990 we only had 100,000 of them. Now we've got 7 or 8 million of them, and they're going to be one of our greatest tragedies, because when the shooting starts, and I think that's what's going to get down to, they're going to get outnumbered. But it's a tragedy that we're ripping our own civilization apart by importing and injecting all of these Muslims into this country, which are antithetical to the American Christian way of life, and that built this country. You know, and the thing is, if Muslims actually ever take over, and they are taking over in Detroit, women's rights go right down the toilet. You've got stonings for adultery. You've got people getting their heads chopped off, which I've written about. There's been honor killings in this country now, a dozen or more. You've got female genital mutilation, which is a horrific operation on little girls, taking away all of their sexual being and just mutilating them. You've got arranged marriages. You've got acid in the face attacks on women. Women wouldn't be able to vote. They wouldn't be able to take an education. You would see a horrific... we would return back to the 6th century of Islam that was started by a warlord tribal thug who was illiterate. He used to behead his enemies. He would cut off the hands of those who transgressed him. That's the tragedy of Islam, and it's the tragedy that's happening to Europe right now. It's certainly a tragedy that's happening here. And as things tighten up, you're going to see more conflict within ourselves, and that is the, you know, and that's the great tragedy when it comes to these wars. We have no business in Iraq. If we were going to attack any country at all, Clay, we should have attacked Saudi Arabia, because 17 of the 19 people who drove those airplanes into the Twin Towers and into the Pentagon were from Saudi Arabia. And yet here we attacked Iraq, and we attacked Afghanistan. I mean, give me a break. And as it was, we never have gone after Osama bin Laden. And I understand he could be dead by now. It doesn't make any difference. But what it means is the military-industrial complex has been making billions and billions and billions of dollars. Halliburton's making billions of dollars. And all this is going on, and our soldiers are just being used as cannon fodder, just like they were in Vietnam and just like they were in Korea. And whomever runs these things, whoever creates these wars, they just make a lot of money, and the rest of us get killed in the process.
You know, I have really dwelt on this for a lot of years, Frosty. I've been doing this for over 20 years, reporting after what happened at Waco.
Yeah.
And you know, I volunteered for Vietnam. I didn't go. They tried to kill me before I got there. But I after I read the Constitution and I read the Communist Manifesto, it occurred to me that the communists weren't over there, they're over here. I mean, it almost makes you ask, who really won the Cold War? And the communists, as far as I'm concerned, were financed by the banksters who always finance both sides of every conflict and have all the way back to the Civil War.
Well, there's no question that the bankers and the moneyed elites, which has, you know, if you look anthropologically down through time, it's always the biggest gorilla in the tribe who runs the tribe, and it was always the biggest star stud that ran the Indian villages. If you look at any and all of anthropological history, it's always the biggest baddest dude. Well, today, if you want to look at evolutionary track anthropologically, who's running the show? It's the person who's the smartest, and the person who's the smartest has the most money, and if a person who's the smartest has the most money, they have the most power. And of course, we all know that power. There are those who are extreme power persons and money persons, and they are at the top of that heap. And if they want to, you know, whether it's Soros, who's the billionaire, or whether it's somebody like Bill Gates, who's a multi-billionaire, 54 billion, I guess. These individuals, if you get one who wants to have ultimate power across the planet, whether again it's the bankers or whatever, they get to call the shots. The one thing that Thomas Jefferson hated was the bankers. He hated foreign entanglements, and yet he and Samuel Adams, and certainly James Madison and John Adams and all those greats from that time gave us the opportunity for the first time in the history of the world that we elected our own leaders to guide the country. But in the last 40 years, less than 50% of the American people vote in national elections, and less than 10% vote in local elections. So we've abdicated this great republic by our sitting on our butts doing nothing, and we're allowing the bankers to fight these wars that we get killed in, to fund these wars where they make the money and we pay. And at some point, it's all going to collapse on itself because we're $14 trillion in debt, and these wars are doing absolutely nothing but just $12 billion more per month. When I think about all the illiteracy rates in this country and all the welfare rates, and then we're spending $12 billion a month over in Iraq and in Afghanistan and now in Libya. At what point are we going to start taking care of our own citizens? And if we don't, what's that going to do to us? And you're seeing it right now. And I don't really have the answer because most Americans really don't care as long as it doesn't affect them. But as we know, it's going to be affecting them in the future. But it depends on how much pain they're going to be able to take before they start taking action and actually voting somebody that's responsible for this country and responsible for the American people. Right now, this president, who is dubious as to his citizenship, and we certainly understand that he is probably a Muslim, is taking this country down a road that's very destructive. And my pain is that the American people let it happen.
Well, I refer to the Republicans and Democrats as two wings of the same bird, and it's a global vulture, not an eagle. Frosty, I've got guests like you, Governor Gary Johnson, Larry Pratt, that are really putting out the truth, great information, and yet the media is so controlled that the average citizen out there watching these nightly news got no idea that this is happening. And I'm not exactly getting rich off of this. People are afraid to advertise on my website because somebody will call them and say, Clay Douglas, he's a radical, he's a right-wing extremist, he's a racist, he's anti-Semitic, and I've worked with presidential candidates that were talking about buying back the Federal Reserve, and reissuing our money, and they couldn't get on TV. Every time they got up to the Republican convention, this is a certified, bona fide, registered presidential candidate, Charles Collins. They would turn every camera on stage off and point it at the ground. They would take down every sign that said Collins for president, so nobody in America ever knew Charles Collins was running for president unless they got the Free American. How do we deal with that?
Well, I don't think we can deal with it because mostly you're looking at an American public that's highly apathetic, and it's now very fractured.
Divide and conquer is the oldest maxim in warfare, Frosty. Divide and conquer.
And it's pretty much, it's run its course. You have a very fractured country. We've got all these different ethnic tribes that are battling for their piece of dominance. And you know, where it used to be once all America, I mean, we used to be 90% European in this country, and we had another 8% African American, and then we had another 3% that was Spanish or Hispanic or whatever. Well, now Europeans are down to almost 50%. I think it's 54%. And then you have all these other contentious tribes. I mean, you got the Somalian tribes, you got the Pakistanis, you got the Iraqis, you've got Ethiopians. I mean, you got the Mexicans, 14 million Mexicans in this country, and they all want their deal, and they want their language, and they want. And you got the Muslims now. You got 8 million Muslims, and they want their Sharia law. What we did was sat by and watched our country simply get fractured from that 1965 Teddy Kennedy. That was his worst. I would say that Teddy Kennedy is the father of the destruction of America with his 1965 Immigration Reform Act. And so we've changed ourselves from what we were, very successful, to now what we are, very contentious and very fractured. I don't see it, and especially now that we're so overpopulated and unable to even when you look at when the Constitution was created, there was 535 congressional reps, 100 senators, and you only had 12 million people in the country back then, and so you had one. I think the commensurate, what you'd need in the Congress right now to give the same representation to all the citizens, you'd have to have well over 8,000 people in Congress to represent all of the American people. And obviously that's not going to happen. And can you imagine what it's going to be like when we hit another 100 million? What kind of contentious representation that will be. And then, we're not going to just add another 100 million, as my book talks about, in 24 years. Another 100 million after that, and another 100 million after that. In fact, in a child born today, they will see America grow from 312 million to over 600 million by the time they're in their 70s. And so we're really in a lot of trouble, and yet no one understands the trouble. Guys like I do, because I've seen it around the world. I've traveled throughout South America. I've traveled through all of Asia, and China, India, and Bangladesh. Overpopulation is the single greatest issue facing America in the 21st century, and it is the most ignored, the most evaded, the most avoided issue of our time, and yet it's the most important one. And I don't know how to help people understand that, and so we'll just keep rolling along until we are faced with it so deathly and deadly that we can't ignore it, because it's killing us.
Frosty, I have tried, again, I've been working on this a long time, and I tried to come up with a solution. I talk about the problems every day for the last 20 years. I talk about the problems and point the fingers at it. We talk about the banksters, we talk about the Zionists, we talk about the Masons and the lawyers and the 13th Amendment. But the answer that I came up with was going back to the foundation of every civilization, the self-sufficient family farms. Now, if we could grow our corn out here on a farm or a village, and we had low-cost housing, people could work together to manage the land, and we could grow our own food, not genetically modified crap, but real food with real nutrition. We could raise our animals, and we could go back to pre-Depression eras when 40% of the American people lived and worked on farms. That's the way this country was founded. And those little farms grew up around villages. So we've done this before. And if you can generate your own energy, and we have the technology now, we don't have to sell the top of that mountain to a foreign corporation so they can come up and put wind generators on. All we got to do is put a wind generator and a windmill on every home, just like they did back coming across this country, and set up windmills to pump the water up. We could power, if we could power these villages and provide our own food. If the Muslims want to go down the street and open up a village of their own and sell, Muslim food, well, no problem. We can compete. Each little unit, each town could compete with other towns, other ethnicities, to see who is the most productive and who manages their land and their villages and their communities or their townships the best. And that whole concept could be applied to every city block in Los Angeles or Denver or any place else. Turn that useless crabgrass into a garden and start growing our food, taking back our farmland and our productivity again. Is that possible?
Yeah, Richard Heinberg talks about that we're going to need 50 million farmers as the gasoline starts to completely vanish from the landscape, because there are no alternatives that can replace gasoline. I also talk about it in the book, but you can actually go to transitionusa.org, transitionusa.org, and there are 5 continents now and over 1,000 cities around the world that are moving toward transitioning from the age of oil, from the oil age, back to the agrarian age. And you're going to you can actually tap in, and there's cities all over the United States that are moving toward food self-sufficiency. There's pretty soon there's not going to be bananas on your table because you can't just transport them in an airplane or a ship and get them back here fast enough from South America or certainly Mexico. You're going to be growing food locally. There will not be any of these 1,000-mile salad plate on your front plate where it's been flown in from somewhere, simply because it's going to be too costly. So for those of you who would like to have more information, I have it in my book, America on the Brink, the next added 100 million Americans. And transitionusa.org will help you get tied into and show you how to become self-sufficient, how to grow your crops, and how to in the urban cities and so forth.
Give me the name of your book. Give me the name of your book again.
Yeah, America on the Brink, the next added 100 million Americans. It describes what we're facing and what we'll have to contend with, and the solutions to change course. You can see it on my website, or you can see it on Amazon. It's also on Kindle. And it really needs to be read by every senator and every House rep and the President of the United States, because and governors of every state and leaders of every city council. I'm even trying to get Golden, Colorado to pass the first Golden stabilized population policy, whereby a city says let's stabilize the population, let's stabilize growth by simply not growing anymore, so that we remain within the carrying capacity of our city, both water and resources and food and energy and all that goes with it. Because in the end, we're either going to do that gracefully, or Mother Nature is going to do it quite brutally.
Frosty, they killed all the small towns around America. They killed the farmers in America. Over the last 100 years, they've destroyed that. And as far as I'm concerned, the cities are nothing more than the New World Order ghettos, the concentration camps. And that's where the police state is. And if you're out 30 miles from the city and you've got your own little community there, and you're growing your own food, and you don't have any problems. You don't have I lived like that for at least 15 years.
Well, there's no question that any way you cut it, we're facing some very sobering realities here in the early part of the 21st century for America. And while we're still getting away with what we're getting away with, and that's, gasoline is only $3.50 a gallon when it's $9 a gallon over in Europe right now. $9 a gallon. You'll see more people on bicycles over in Europe. 60, 70, 80-year-old women are pedaling their bicycles down the street. Mass transit is really the dominant reality, because when you're talking $8 and $9 a gallon, there's nobody that can pay that kind of money, and we're going to get to that. And so you are going to see a transformation in this country, and the sooner we get to that reality, the better off we are. And what are the solutions? In my book, I have 3 chapters at the end of the book. The first and most important thing is to work at your community level and on recycling. We need recycling laws in this country to recycle all the glass, all the plastic, all the cans, all the aluminum, so we quit just destroying the planet by mining all this stuff. And the next thing we need to do is really have a discussion in this country on conservation of energy. I mean, all these 8-cylinder high-powered cars. Let's get down to 2-cylinder cars, electric cars. Let's get down to solar-powered cars. Let's get to something besides oil-driven cars. And then finally, I talk about community involvement and growing food and so forth. But in the end, we've got to stop mass immigration into this country. And I call for a moratorium of 10 years, and then after that, a maximum of 100,000 per year, or even just 100,000 per year. And why? Because 100,000 people egress this country every year, so we could actually maintain a stable population. And we're really going to have to get to that, because if we don't, again, as I've said, Mother Nature is going to get to it for us, and it's going to be a really ugly result. As I've said, and it's 18 million people starving to death every year around the planet. It's already resulting around the planet, and in time it will result here also. You will see, and right now we have, I think 13.4, according to Katie Couric on CBS News, 13.4 million children in this country are living below the poverty level and going to sleep every night hungry. Those numbers are going to get huge here in the coming years if we add this 100 million people. So again, we can stop this. We can change this. Go to numbersusa.org with Roy Beck. There are 2 incredible videos. One is called Immigration, Poverty, and Gumballs, and the other one is called Immigration Off the Charts. One's 5 minutes long, one is 10 minutes long. And again, it's called numbersusa.org. Get those 2 videos. Send them to all your friends. Show them how fast we're adding 100 million people and how fast we need to stop that if we're going to save ourselves and our children in the future of this country.
All right, Frosty Wooldridge, the links are up there. I will get information for your book up there. I don't know, you might try me again, clay@freeamerican.com. Send me any information. But this show will be up. It'll be saved. It'll be up on YouTube. And, people need to understand this. You've really provided a lot of wonderful information. And answers. The Liberty Village concept, I came up with that almost 10 years ago, and I think it's more important right now. The food prices are rising, the genetically modified crap. Rats won't eat this genetically modified corn that Monsanto creates.
You got it.
All right. Frosty, thanks again for being with me.
Clay, thank you very much. Godspeed and God bless. And remember, folks, a republic is not a spectator sport. You have to get in and get involved in your government to make change happen. So I hope that each one of you gets involved in the United States of America at your local level, state level, and national level to move this country toward a viable future. That's right, and you're absolutely right. Start right there at the county. Start at the town you're in. Start getting active. Don't let them try to tell you, oh, you're a conspiracy theorist. Oh, Frosty's a racist. You're going to get that, folks, because all they can do when they're wrong is call you names. That's correct. I'm a mathematics teacher, and I absolutely accept the U.S. Constitution, and I stand by it. That makes me a strong human being, and that's all that really counts. All right. Thanks again, Frosty Wooldridge. Frosty.
Call recording has been completed.